this every time, is that Ken Shoulder's work got weaponized. I think that we suppressed cold fusion in 1989. We knew it was real. We knew that negative energy was the answer to achieve cold fusion, which is fusion temperatures that are much lower than the temperature of the sun. I mean, look what we're looking at here. It's not even red. It's not even the same heat signature as the engine. So this is room temperature. And that we figured out that plasma has these magical properties and that it's not even hard to create. It's like once you figured it out, it's like figuring out fire. It's like before you understand how to make fire, it would seem magical. The first person that rubs two sticks together, you go, whoa, how do you do that? Once you've learned, now it's easy. Now we've got a lighter that can do it, you know? And that's what I think is going to happen with this plasma here. So we'll come back to that in a second, but I want to finish this video. So we've shown those pieces of evidence. And so watch the orb spin around the video and go ahead and hit play here. And notice, imagine you're the camera operator. Why are they zooming out right here? Well, they know something's about to happen. And then poof. Wow. And if you can go to, I think the end of this video has like a slow-mo version of that. Yeah, like past this, but this is also part of the original video. Is like they do this weird zoom in on that. Okay, here you go. Yeah, play this out. So look at that collapse of the orbs, and then look at, so right here, the orbs are reorienting, which is why they're going blurry. And then all of a sudden they pop out of that, and you can see the heat signature again clearly, and then they converge on the plane. And then you can actually see the gravitational lensing in the frame right before this. If you go back a couple frames. One more for that one right there. Look at how they're blurred and the orbs are flat now. And the plane is blurred as well. They're actually creating an electromagnetic field that's causing gravitational lensing. Or lensing, maybe it's not, if you don't want to call it gravitational, it's just a lensing effect happening right there. Why are they even collapsing on the plane? Well, we found just a week ago a video from Bob Lazar, who, yeah, everybody has their own opinions on Bob Lazar. I happen to think he's at least mostly authentic. But he was saying that these UFOs would have 3 gravitational beams on them. And the way they would work is they would take their 3 beams and they would converge them together and they would pull a distant point in space towards them. This is explaining a wormhole. The amazing part about this video of Bob Lazar is that I think this predates Miguel Alcubierre's warp drive paper in 1994, which is huge. Because if Bob Lazar was talking about warp drives and wormholes before the math was even done to show that it's a real solution to Einstein's general relativity, that's impressive. The fact that Bob Lazar is talking about them converging together, and that's what we're seeing here, made me look into the science of it. And you find out there's something called Coulomb's force. Turns out the equation for Coulomb's law, which is electrical forces, has the same exact form as the equation for gravity. The force equals a constant times either mass 1 or mass 2 or charge 1 times charge 2 divided by distance squared, r squared, which means they both fall off at the inverse square law. The further away you get, the force becomes exponentially weaker. Now, the opposite is true as well. The closer you get, the more powerful the force gets, exponentially more powerful. So what's happening in those videos? The answer is clear. Same way if I were to take 2 magnets that are same polarity and jam them together, I'm going to have an extremely powerful repulsive force. That's what those orbs are doing right there. And how this all comes together between the plasmas and everything, all the science is connected, is that you have Coulomb repulsion. This is what should be forcing electrons to reflect. The same reason why where I jam my hand on this chair, my hand doesn't go flying through the chair. Why? Because the electrons in my hand are bouncing off the electrons or repelling the electrons from the chair. Otherwise, I would fall right through it. So you jamming your orbs together, creating this Coulomb repulsion, but at the same time, you're creating something called a Casimir cavity. So you create this Casimir bubble, and the Casimir effect wants to attract together. So you've got the Coulomb force repelling apart, and you've got the Casimir force pulling things together. Theoretically, these can offset. And now if they offset at a certain region, you create a bubble. You could create a bubble around an area. That's exactly what I think those orbs are doing right there. I think they're creating a Casimir shell, as we would call it, which is the equilibrium point between the Coulomb repulsion and the Casimir attraction. And I don't know that anybody can really debunk this, although I think people will argue and say that, well, no, the electrical forces are so much more smaller or what have you. But what you have to realize, and this is something I think Bob Greenier told you, is that it's scale invariant, these forces, which means that they work the same way on tiny scales as they do on large scales. And if that's the case, then the difference between these small forces of an electron is the size. So you could almost argue that what we're looking at with those orbs is a large electron, very large, upscaled electron. It turns out that Ken Shoulders, in his plasma research, he strongly believed what was causing the electrons to clump together was some type of Casimir attraction offsetting the Coulomb repulsion. So you're starting to see now that, oh, it's all the same science that is connecting these concepts. And I sent you a link last night. I don't think we have the video up right here, right now. Brand new information just saw last night. I was watching an interview of Ken Shoulders talking to John Hutchinson. And around 22 minutes and 30 seconds into this video, he says, we saw these EVOs disappearing things. What? Wow. Because now you're saying, like, people were experimenting. And he says, we saw it in the lab, disappearing things. Bob Greenier's talked about this as well. Bob Greenier's view of those videos is that it's probably annihilation, but it could be teleportation. My view is the opposite, is that I'm pretty sure we're looking at teleportation, just like Bob Lazar said. You converge them together and you have a fourth orb somewhere else, and that's where you determine the vector of travel, where it's going to show up. In fact, that's why people call me. My name's Ashton Forbes, but they call me Ashton Four Orbs now because my buddy Dave Rossi promoted this theory of the fourth orb must be where they determine the direction of travel. And he went on Tim Pool with me last year, and he's a DoD defense contractor and engineer himself. He's a very connected guy. And he told me he's seen these experiments in the labs as well. Like, literally, he's talking about teleportation. So I'm hoping that in the future, when people start to understand that this science is real, which they will because science is a discovery, that as we understand that teleportation is a real thing and not just Star Trek sci-fi stuff, that people look back at these videos and go, okay, maybe those videos are what happened on the plane. Maybe that is why we didn't find it anywhere, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just a couple questions to close out the first part.
Yep.
So the three orbs circling around the plane and then one more orb in the distance. How does it transport?
Yeah. So our best understanding, there's two ways of looking at it. One is that when these orbs are squeezing in on the plane, there's some finite amount of force that's allowing this medium to be manipulated, where then that would determine where the plane shows up. This is what I would call the Bob Greenier explanation, which is what Bob Greenier believes, is that, you know, as they're squeezing together, how fast they squeeze together will determine how powerful the electromagnetic fields are, and that this is ideally would be like taking a turkey baster, squeeze the turkey baster, and the stuff shoots out. At some point, it's just going to go wherever it goes, and it's going to stop. The other thought, which was the theory that Dave Rossi proposed, my friend Dave Rossi, said that, well, you have this fourth orb, and that orb would be entangled to the other orbs, quantum entanglement. And so therefore, when those three orbs break the Schwinger limit by converging together and creating this endothermic event that we saw before the break, that is then snapping that location of that plane to the location of wherever that fourth orb is at. I think what we're really getting down to here now is, like, what are the limitations of this technology? Are there limitations of this technology? And I think that's one of the most amazing parts, is that I think that there are. I think that this technology is not infinite in power, although it's close. But I think that even as amazing as it is to say that we teleported a Boeing 777 in 2014, that's just the beginning. You may be limited, these orbs might be limited to planet Earth, in the sense that they may be pulling like hydrogen or another element out of the atmosphere, out of the water, to create the ball of plasma that they're doing. They might be pulling the energy from the environment. If that's the case, then maybe they can't work in outer space, or maybe they need another variation of this technology to work in outer space. If we do need a fourth orb, then we have another limitation now. Now that we need to get that fourth orb to wherever we want our destination to be, which kind of rules out Andromeda Galaxy. It's like, how am I going to get that orb to the Andromeda Galaxy, right? So then you look at it, well, how could you make this even better? And I say, well, what if we found out that certain points in space and time were already entangled, and we could manipulate existing entanglement. What if we found out that one point in space and time in the Andromeda Galaxy is entangled to this point right here in front of me? And then we can manipulate that entanglement and use that now as our virtual fourth orb, and I can now teleport to the Andromeda Galaxy. This opens the door to stuff like Stargates. Like, I would actually go so far as to say, I think that most of what we see in Star Trek, a lot of what we see in Star Wars, and basically everything we see in Stargate, SG-1 or whatever Stargate TV show you like, are all real physics that is just beyond where we're currently at right now, at least from what the public understands. And that's why I do what I do in terms of these conversations. I've never been paid for any podcast. I've never actually sold anything on any podcast before either. I just want to wake people up to, like, we have this technology that's out there. It's consistent with physics that exists, that is peer-reviewed scientific papers, even the more esoteric aspects of what we've been discussing. And we need to catch up to that from the public perspective. We're so far behind now that we shouldn't be looking at those MH370 videos and immediately thinking aliens. We should be looking at those videos and going, well, the United States government's filming this. The person who's controlling this drone video obviously knows something's going to happen. This implicates humans being involved. And also, to your point, I think we were talking about at dinner last night. It's like, how do you know this is not aliens? Like, what can you steel man the argument that it could be aliens as well? And I think one of the big reasons is that if aliens exist and they have technology that's this far beyond the paradigm, which I think that makes sense that they would, then why would they care about us at all? Like, to them, we're just ants. Like, do you go to the jungle and start messing with the tigers in the jungle? No, you don't care, right? Like, who gives a crap about that?
Yeah, I'm way past aliens for this specific this specific event. I don't think aliens are at all necessary. Maybe we get into like why this specific plane was targeted next, and that can kind of explain why aliens wouldn't be necessary. But I mean, yeah, if the government today did not have technology that we didn't know about, that was more advanced than what we know about, that would be the first time in human history that
yeah,
was
two big things that I think are great points to point out here for people is that, one, everybody agrees the military and government has technology that's decades beyond the public.
Right.
What does that look like?
Right.
That's what people should be thinking about. What does that look like? What if it looks like what we were looking at in those videos? I think that is exactly what it looks like. The other thing, too, is that every scientific theory in history, every scientist, every era in scientific history has been certain that they have it all figured out. And every single time, they've been proven wrong. We went from Isaac Newton's theory of gravity to Einstein's theory of general relativity. And now we're going to move from there to this world of zero-point energy and zero-point fluctuations, which simply do the same thing that Einstein did to Newton. It expands upon general relativity, and it unifies the very small, the quantum, with the stuff that we see that's very large, the macroscopic. And all the papers that prove it have already been published. I think that you could argue there's no less than half a dozen, maybe even more independent scientists that have all figured this out. And they all have slightly different concepts and views on how the zero-point energy explains gravity, mass, inertia, dark energy, dark matter, etc. So there's a couple groups that stick out right off the bat. I'm not sure if people really know about this, but there were 2 Iranian passengers that were on stolen passports on this plane that were traveling together. They'd paid tens of thousands of dollars for the passports and for the tickets. They knew each other. They both changed their appearance to look like the people in the stolen passports. To me, those people should have been, red flags should have been going up. These people got dismissed in under 48 hours by the official investigation. And they claimed that these people were going to Amsterdam as refugees or something like that, which makes no sense, because they're going from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. There's a direct flight to Amsterdam from Kuala Lumpur. Why would you risk going through a communist country where you could get caught at any moment? Why would you risk any of that? It makes no sense. And we're not really happy with Iran at the moment. They're very interesting. I still don't know exactly how to tie them together, but if this is some type of espionage event where the United States government is involved, you might need operatives on board the plane while you're hijacking it or preparing to do what you do to keep everybody calm so that people aren't going to rise up or what have you. The other group that's really interesting is the 20 Freescale semiconductor engineers on board this plane. There is a conspiracy theory that's out there that is close, but actually also false, that claims that there were 4 engineers on board this plane and that some patent reverted to the Rothschilds or something like that. Well, it turns out there was not 4 people. There was 20 people from this company. Turns out those 4 people in general from that conspiracy theory were not even on the plane. It also turns out that's not how patents work either. The individuals do not own the patent when it's in the name of the company itself. But the rest of it's pretty much true, which is that the motive for taking this plane is definitely 20 engineers from an American Freescale Semiconductor company that produces extremely powerful microchips, that has contracts with U.S. Aerospace and Defense, that was named in a 2005 National Security Agency report about the emergence of superconductive microchips. Why is superconductive microchip so important? Because superconductivity, zero electrical resistance, is a quantum effect at the macroscopic level. So you're taking magic, like stuff like quantum entanglement, teleportation, and you're seeing it visually at a macroscopic level that we can observe. And the theory is that these guys, they had just produced a microchip smaller than the dimple in a golf ball, like smaller than like the head of my nail here.
At what company?
Freescale Semiconductors.
Okay, got it.
20 of them, way too many people for one plane. 8 of them are Chinese nationals, 12 are Malaysian nationals. They're all working for the American company, Freescale Semiconductors. The story goes these people were defecting to China, or they were bringing the technology and intellectual property to China, and that the United States government knew that it was going to happen, and they planned out an operation in advance to prevent it from happening. Now, did that operation go as planned? Couldn't say. There's a lot of gaps that only the United States government can say. Why? Why risk this? Why do this? Why break out the orbs? Why do all this, right? When it comes to why questions, I can only speculate to some degree, but I can add in what evidence leads me to come to those conclusions. The biggest thing that shifted me away from thinking this was like an accidental fire where we bring the orbs in to rescue it or whatever was something called Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes. Is by far the creepiest thing I've ever had happen to me. I had you listen to it last night.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing. Just about 10, 11 minutes.
Every time I listen to it, I've listened to it 50 times, like the hair stands over my arms. Yeah. There's a part in this letter where it's like, "Hi, Ashton, impressive." It's like, this is like one of those, like, I don't even know, just too freaky. And as time has gone on, I've become more and more convinced that letter is legit. When I say legit, I'm not saying that every detail has to be accurate. I'm saying that this was somebody in the know, either a foreign intelligence agency or our intelligence agency in the United States, sending me a message. It was clearly a message of inspiration and one meant to keep me going.
When was it sent and what did it say?
January 9th, I want to say. And basically the way it played out.
2024.
Yeah, just this year. Mm-hmm. The way it played out was like this YouTube account appears. It has these very highly produced AI videos. Now the scripts themselves don't read as AI. The voice is clearly AI, but the scripts read like somebody was doing a creative writing class and came up with this stuff. And it seemed like they were trying to get my attention because they were talking about the Miami Mall aliens incident in January. And I had posted about it, got like 10 million views on it. Turned out to be this kind of maybe hoax, weird social media thing going on. And the letter was so, like, I want to say they weren't mad at me, but they were like admonishing me for, like, if you want to talk about Miami Mall aliens, do that. But this is like way better if you want to like talk about this. So they have these couple of videos about that. And then there's this video just called Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes, like specifically to me. The other videos weren't to anybody else. And then after that, there was a couple other videos that kind of clarified some of the questions that people had. So clearly the person that sent this video was watching because I was doing streams on it, talking about it, trying to dissect it. And then the last 2 videos they did were about the glitter conspiracy. And they argued that the glitter, like, there's this weird conspiracy about glitter where, like, only a couple companies in the whole United States, both based in New Jersey, make glitter. And they have basically a hidden customer, which turns out to be the U.S. military. And that they're, like, able to produce stuff that's very small and potentially even, like, put it into drugs and stuff like that to control people's behaviors, which was pretty far out there, but interesting. And then the other one was about Chan Thomas. And Chan Thomas was one of these people that predicted like the magnetic poles flipping and cataclysm and believed that he could predict earthquakes and stuff. Adam and Eve story. Yeah. And then channel went dark. So under a week after it posted this video, channel went dark, still dark to this day. You can go find it. I think the video to me has got like 30,000 views now at this point. But the other videos have very few. So to me, it's crazy to think about the letter, because the letter poses, it's like if I had the biggest super fan ever, like looking through my evidence and knew everything that I had researched. And the reason why this is so odd, which I think outside people won't quite understand, is that I interact with a lot of people, my own fans. And when even people that support me, try to like present the arguments for why the videos are real, usually they get a couple things wrong here or there. Small things don't really matter that much. But this person, they knew like everything. And they presented this idea that this had been an espionage event from the very beginning. And at this point, before this, I had been proposing the idea that the United States was saving the airplane from certain doom. It was going to try to land on the ocean, rip apart. Everybody was going to die. But then you start to look at it from this perspective of espionage, and you're like, that does kind of make a lot of sense. Like, we have been at adversarial towards China over the last 10 years
since this happened.
Yep. You can imagine that, to your point, do other countries have this technology? You can imagine if one country does, the other ones are going to try to figure out how to reproduce it. And I would think that China is probably number 2 right now. Like Russia, probably a third in line at this point. China's smart.
So this video, A Letter to Ashton, is a voice recording, AI created, and kind of explains a new theory for you, which is the possibility of, or going down that same path of espionage, deeper down